The most powerful language in the world is not English. It is not Mandarin. It is not Spanish. It is descended from Phoenician, the language of sailors and merchants who built the first commercial empire the world had ever seen. It is spoken by 2.3 billion people. It has no word that translates directly to republic. The civilization that produced it was not supposed to win. Rome was supposed to win. Rome almost always wins. The morning after the Battle of Cannae, a cavalry commander rode to a general's tent and made an argument. The general listened. And everything, every language, every religion, every legal system, every nation-state that descended from Rome, became something else. Cannae was not just a battle. It was the demonstration that Rome could be beaten. 70,000 Romans died in a single afternoon. The consular army, the full military power of the Republic, ceased to exist as a fighting force. Hannibal had marched over the Alps with an army of mercenaries and allies, fought Rome in Italy for 2 years, and dealt it a blow from which, by any military logic, it could not recover. His cavalry commander Hannibal understood what the victory meant. He rode to Hannibal that night, and in our timeline, what he said was recorded by Livy, 6 centuries later: "Come, let us follow the gods, that in 5 days I shall feast you in the capital. Delay not." Hannibal delayed. Hannibal's reply, also recorded: "You know how to gain a victory, Hannibal. You do not know how to use one." Hannibal's reasons for delay are still debated. His army was exhausted. His supply lines were thin. Rome's walls were formidable. He may have calculated that the Italian allies would defect to him and Rome would negotiate without a siege. Some did defect. Rome did not negotiate. He waited too long. Scipio Africanus was born. Rome recovered. Carthage was eventually destroyed. In this timeline, Hannibal wins the argument. Not because Hannibal suddenly becomes reckless. Because the intelligence Hannibal brings that morning is more complete than what Hannibal had the night before. Roman scouts have confirmed the road to Rome is open. The allied cities of Campania are sending messengers asking which side to join. The Roman Senate is in a state that one captured courier's letter describes as indistinguishable from panic. Hannibal marches at dawn on August 3, 216 BC. He reaches the walls of Rome 9 days later. Rome's walls were substantial. But Hannibal had something the historians of our timeline always noted he lacked at the critical moment: momentum. The city's garrison was a skeleton. Its veterans were dead on the plain at Cannae. The emergency levies being scraped together, slaves promised freedom, boys too young to shave, veterans too old to march, could man the walls but could not stop a sustained assault by an army that had just destroyed the finest legions the Republic had ever fielded. The Senate debates. A delegation is sent. Hannibal's terms are not what Rome expected. He does not demand the city's destruction. Carthage's war aim was never the annihilation of Rome, it was the dismantling of Roman hegemony over Italy and the Mediterranean. Hannibal offers the Latin allies their independence, confirms the Italian Confederacy's freedom from Roman taxation and military conscription, and demands the return of all Carthaginian territory, the surrender of the Roman fleet, and a war indemnity equivalent to 3 years of Roman treasury revenue. The terms are humiliating. They are also survivable. Rome signs. It is not destroyed. Its population lives. Its institutions continue in some form. But it is no longer the center. It becomes a second-tier city in an Italian peninsula that no longer has a single master, in a Mediterranean world that now has a different one. What dies at Cannae, then, is not Rome. It is the trajectory. Carthage does not build an empire the way Rome did. This is the key difference, and it is rooted in what Carthage was. Rome was a land power that learned to trade. Carthage was a trading power that learned to fight when it had to. Its governing class were merchants and ship owners, not generals and senators. The word they had for their highest magistrates, sophetes, is best translated not as consuls but as directors. They thought in terms of market access, not territorial control. The result is a Mediterranean world that is more plural than the one Rome would have built. The Greek city-states survive as genuinely autonomous political units rather than being absorbed into Roman provincial administration. Egypt retains its Ptolemaic dynasty through the 2nd century BC rather than falling to Roman annexation. The Phoenician diaspora, already spread from Spain to Lebanon, becomes the connective tissue of a commercial civilization that has no political center but an economic one. This is not a utopia. Carthaginian commercial empire is extractive in its own ways. It replaces Roman military tribute with trade terms that consistently favor Carthaginian merchants, and its treatment of enslaved people on the great agricultural estates of North Africa and Spain is indistinguishable from Rome's in its brutality. The slavery doesn't end. It just moves. Rome rebuilds. It takes a century. It develops differently. Without the engine of conquest driving its economy, it becomes a manufacturing and agricultural center rather than an administrative capital. Latin survives and evolves into the regional languages of the Italian peninsula. But the Latin-derived languages of our world, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Romanian, never exist in their recognizable forms, because the Roman colonization and administration that spread Latin across Western Europe never happens. Western Europe speaks something else. Several things. None of them descended from Latin. The absence of Roman civilization in Western Europe is the single most transformative fact in the alternate timeline, and it is almost impossible to overstate how different everything downstream of it becomes. Christianity, as we know it, does not exist. Jesus of Nazareth still lives, still preaches in Judea in the 1st century AD. The historical conditions that produced his ministry, Roman occupation, Jewish resistance theology, the apocalyptic tradition of the Second Temple, are still present. But the mechanism by which his movement became the dominant religion of the Western world was specifically Roman. The Pauline letters were written in Greek to audiences in Roman cities. The Church organized itself along Roman administrative lines. The Council of Nicaea was called by a Roman emperor. Without Rome, the movement that begins in Judea in the 1st century remains a Jewish sect. A significant one, it spreads along trade routes, it reaches Alexandria and Carthage and eventually the Iberian Peninsula and Gaul. But it does not have the institutional vehicle of Roman imperial sponsorship to carry it from sect to civilization. What fills the vacuum in Western Europe is a mix of surviving Celtic and Germanic religious traditions alongside the eastward spread of the Mithras cult and various Semitic mystery religions that traveled the Carthaginian trade routes. There is no single dominant religious tradition in this world. The closest thing to a universal moral philosophy is Stoicism, which in this timeline is able to develop freely as a philosophical school without being either absorbed into Christian theology or suppressed as heresy. The consequences for the next 2 millennia of intellectual history are profound and impossible to trace precisely. But one thing is clear, without the specific package of Roman law, Christian ethics, and Latin administrative language, the Enlightenment, that particular Western European burst of rationalism in the 17th and 18th centuries, does not happen in the form we know it. Something happens. Ideas compound regardless of who is doing the compounding. But the specific vocabulary of rights, reason, and the social contract that emerged from Locke and Rousseau and Jefferson was written by people who had Roman law as their reference point and Christian natural theology as their framework. Neither of those exists in the alternate world. What does emerge, eventually, is its own tradition of rights and governance, but it arrives through different routes, through through the evolution of Carthaginian commercial law into something resembling contract theory, through the survival of Greek democratic practice in the city-states of the Eastern Mediterranean, through the gradual philosophical maturation of the mystery religion traditions into ethical systems. It arrives later. And it arrives without the universalist framing that Roman law and Christian theology gave our Enlightenment. In the alternate world, rights are more often things traders have, or citizens of particular cities have. The concept of universal human rights is slower to emerge, and when it does, it speaks Phoenician. The world in 2026 is more multipolar than ours, and it got there without going through the specific catastrophes that our world used to learn its lessons. There was no First World War. The alliance system that produced it was specifically a product of European nation-states competing for colonies and industrial dominance, and nation-states of the European variety, with their particular mixture of Roman legal inheritance, Christian universalism, and Romantic nationalism, never form in this timeline. The Northern European successor cultures developed differently, more tribal, more federated, more comfortable with plurality. There was no Holocaust. The specific conditions that produced the Holocaust, the European history of Christian anti-Semitism, the nation-state's capacity for bureaucratic industrial murder, the particular pathology of German Romantic nationalism, none of these exist in this form. Jewish communities exist throughout this world, primarily in the Levant and along Carthaginian trade routes, and are no more or less persecuted than any other minority trading community. Which is to say, they face discrimination and occasional violence, but not the specific industrialized extermination that required a particular kind of modern state to execute. Carthage in 2026 is the wealthiest city on Earth. It has been, with only brief interruptions, the center of the world's most important trade network since the 5th century BC. Its population speaks a creolized descendant of Phoenician as a trade lingua franca, though the city itself is genuinely multilingual. Tamazight Berber, Arabic precursor Semitic languages, Greek, and a dozen Atlantic trading languages are all heard in its markets. Its political system is a constitutional oligarchy, an executive council of merchant princes elected by property-owning citizens, with an advisory assembly of guild representatives and regional delegates. It would not be recognizable as a democracy by our standards. It would be recognizable as stable, commercially sophisticated, and extraordinarily effective at managing the competing interests of a civilization that spans 3 continents. The Americas were contacted by Carthaginian Atlantic traders around 980 AD, following the same Norse routes, but with Carthaginian commercial incentives behind them. The disease catastrophe was less severe because contact was gradual and trading rather than military, allowing some immunity to build over generations rather than arriving as a single epidemic wave. The Aztec Triple Alliance and the Andean Federation survive into the modern era as genuinely autonomous powers. They are junior partners in the Carthaginian trade network, which is a relationship with its own exploitative dimensions, but they were never conquered, never subjected to forced Christian conversion, never had their populations reduced by 90% in a generation. The world has 9.2 billion people. Roughly the same as ours, because the demographic forces that drive population growth are deeper than any particular civilization's choices. Technology in this world is roughly comparable to ours in most domains, arriving through different paths. Computing exists, developed through the mathematical traditions of the Greek and Phoenician schools rather than the specific European tradition that produced Turing and von Neumann. It is perhaps 40 years behind our timeline in raw processing power, but its architecture is more distributed from the start because it was never developed as a military project by a single superpower. What this world does not have is the specific catastrophe of our 20th century. No industrialized world wars. No nuclear weapons deployed in combat. No Holocaust. No colonialism of the European variety. What it also does not have is the specific achievements our catastrophes forced. The United Nations was born from the ash of 2 world wars. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was written by people who had just watched industrial genocide. The civil rights movement in the United States was shaped by the specific legacy of chattel slavery. In this world, none of these pressures produce those specific responses. There is less catastrophic suffering. There is also less catastrophic moral clarity. Whether the trade is worth it is exactly the kind of question that has no answer. Hannibal was right. Hannibal knew how to gain a victory and not how to use one. The historians of our timeline noted this as his fatal flaw, with the benefit of hindsight from a world that Rome went on to build. But here is what those historians couldn't account for: they were writing in Latin. In a tradition shaped by Roman law, Roman administration, Roman Christianity. The story they told about Hannibal's failure was told by the civilization that benefited from it. In the alternate world, there are historians too. They write about the great general who marched on Rome and what it cost. They note that 2 billion people speak a language descended from his civilization's traders. They live in a world that is more multipolar, less scarred by the specific catastrophes of European colonial modernity, and also less shaped by the specific moral achievements those catastrophes forced. They cannot know what they missed. Neither can we know, fully, what we lost when Rome won. What language would you be speaking if Hannibal had ridden to that tent an hour earlier? And would the world that produced it be better or worse than the one you're in right now? I genuinely don't know. But I think it's the right question to sit with. Until the vault opens again, subscribe to the Alternate Archive.